All right, good morning. We're on to lecture, or chapter 24, lecture A, first lecture this week. We're going to talk about the 1950s. Yay, said no one. We'll get through this in a couple of days. A big thing for this week, make sure you've got your chapter 23 reaction quiz finished up. I haven't looked at the online course yet to see if everyone's got that completed. I think we got everything else caught up till last week. There was no actual quiz last week. It was just a reaction quiz because this week you've got your midterm. I pushed it back about 4 or 5 days because of all the snow and the schedule. So this Wednesday will be your midterm. And this midterm is different. It is all completely autonomously online. It's not open to an open book, so I'm giving a little bit of leeway here, but it is on the website and it will not release until later this week. That being said, you four will take it this hour in my room, and all the other classes I'll make sure we'll get them going, and those of you at other schools, you'll take it during your respective hour you take it. That being said, the multiple choice is all like the quiz setting, and then the Google Doc. You'll have a copy of a Google Doc. Just click on the document. It will open the test, and you will write directly on there, and it will fill in just kind of like your reaction quizzes. So I'm doing a little bit different this way, especially with the other schools and the kids that take me multiple hours. This way I don't have to track down or send back papers. Those of you at Fairfax, I do have your tests graded. They've been graded for a week. I will try to get the grades updated and sent to you today, and I will try to get the test sent back with Mr. Nichols in the coming days. But they are graded and they're fine. No worries on that aspect for you guys. That being said, that's this week ahead. Chapter 24 reaction quiz is posted. It is dealing with one thing we're going to talk about, the 1950s massive retaliation, which is actually a fun topic, and we could spend hours talking about it. That's probably the most important or fun element from this affluent society. And then the second thing is Friday, I will, and that reaction quiz, because the midterms this week, I gave you a couple additional days for it to be completed. Friday, I will post the chapter 24 quiz for the book. The other thing to make sure you're tracking is the Cold War essay that you have to read, the Cold War New Story, New History by, I think, is it Gladys? Make sure you are, or Gaddis, I think it's Gaddis. Make sure you are reading that book. You're going to get an entire week in, I think, April to do it. Make sure you get it done. A lot of people don't read the book. There's specific questions. All the information is on the Google Classroom for the essay. Those of you in this class already have a copy of the book. You will have, like I said, that week to complete it. And when it's due, all right? And it's very, very straightforward of what to do. And the format is Turabian. It's a little bit different than you're used to. So don't wait to the end. If you have questions about Turabian, I will help you. It's actually very easy. It's second nature to me now. But you cannot just wait till the night before to expect to get an A. It will not happen, especially with the Turabian format. And I will eat you up to some degree if you are not even close. Okay. That being said, I'm not trying to kill you. I'm trying to prepare you, because pretty much everyone that's taken a history class with me has talked about when they take a history class in college, the Turabian format is almost, I would say 75%, 3/4 of the time used by professors, especially if you take a history class. Not all of them. Some of them will use MLA, but I can tell you that a bulk of the history professors will use Turabian, at least at several of the universities. It depends. Depends on a lot of staff's prerogatives. Northwest they've used a lot. Missouri Western, it's kind of miss. I don't think it sounds like Truman does a lot of Turabian, but there is some out there that will live and die by Turabian. So. Chicago Turabian is pretty much exactly the same. I mean, there's minimal differences. Sometimes it's called Turabian, sometimes it's called Chicago. They're essentially the same exact thing. It's just, I think, naming, to be honest. So, if it says Chicago Turabian, I'm okay with Chicago. It's essentially Turabian. It's just there's a few differences, but nothing measurable. Okay, 1950s, affluent society. Focus questions. What were the main characteristics of the affluent society of the 50s? How were the 50s a period of consensus both in domestic and foreign affairs? What were the major thrusts of the civil rights movement in this period? We are going to start getting to the civil rights, not quite yet, but we're going to get into the elements of that. And what was the significance of the election of 1960? Okay, the 1950s is a great age to actually study in some degree, but it's also very boring in some aspects because, well, I call it the Leave It to Beaver generation because, if you ever watched Leave It to Beaver, the mom stays at home, makes the meals, kids go to school, dad works a 9-to-5 job, wears a suit. It's like a cookie cutter mentality, right? And that really is what the 1950s is. It gives birth to some of the most boring architecture in the country. Houses built in the 50s are rather blah, but they're functional, right? So there's some good in the 50s, obviously, as well. But okay, the Golden Age. One person has called this period, actually not just one, there's multiple people, have called this period of the Golden Age of capitalism. Right now, I would say we are not in the Golden Age of capitalism. Right now, there's a push to do away with end of capitalism, which there is some problems with capitalism, I will not deny, but I don't think people understand enough economic systems to truly understand the extremes of all elements. There can definitely be an extreme of capitalism, but the 1950s is like a perfect balance. You've got rich people, you've got a great middle class, and you've got very few that are in the poor poverty. Okay. Now, minorities still have a struggle in the 50s. It's not universally across the board that everyone's great, but it was still 1 in 5 Americans were considered poverty, but even Americans' poverty is still better than some countries' middle class. What people don't realize, well, the poverty rate's at this. Most Americans, even to this day, the biggest kicker is getting good food. Most Americans can get food. It's getting quality food. What I mean by that is going to McDonald's every night is not quality food to the most part. There are some good healthy things at McDonald's they've introduced now, but that's what we're getting at. Most Americans have access to food. It's the quality of food. And we also have, obviously, at schools, the free and reduced lunch and all these programs, right, to help people. But in the 50s, it's like the peak period where we only have 22% in poverty. Between 1950 and 73, average real wages and everything doubled. Numerous innovations include daily lives, TV, air conditioning. Right now, we don't care about air conditioning. I think everyone would just leave their windows up if it got up to 100 because we're so freaking tired of being cold right now. But the point of it is air conditioning will allow people to live in places that are constantly heat, like Florida, Arizona. The boom of Arizona, Florida, even Las Vegas, Nevada area does not occur until the 50s and 60s. Because why? Air conditioning. And also water. They also bring in a lot of irrigated water or tubed water. Nah, that's not probably the word I'm looking for, but water brought in from other lakes across state lines. That's what I'm getting at. At the time, the widespread affluency and the narrowing gap between rich and poor seemed to have become a permanent feature. When period ended, succeeded by even a larger period of stagnant economics for the most part, when there was a growing, increasing inequality. So the 50s and 60s is the closest we ever get to, I'm not going to call it utopia, but far as capitalism where there's not a huge class difference. You have rich people, but they're not leaps and bounds higher than the middle class. Okay? This will end late 60s, early 70s, and so this great period of amazingness is going to be followed by very stagnant economic, and then it's going to lead into the late 70s, early 80s, in which you have the super rich, a lot of middle class, and a lot of poor. Okay? Where there's a huge difference. Like the super rich have yachts, and the middle class maybe has just a 4 or 5 bedroom home, a lot of debt, mortgages. So there's going to be a lot of differences in that. Now, a changing economy. Like other wars, Cold War was fueled by U.S. industrial production and a promoted redistribution of the nation's population and economic resources. So the Cold War is not an actual war that's fought, right? We ended talking about Chapter 23, the end of World War II, getting into now what we call the post-war years. There's 2 types of wars, hot war, cold war. What's a hot war? Yeah, it's actual boom, boom, bang, bang, right? Shooting. An actual war. Cold war is ideology, words, posturing, positioning. So the Cold War that emerges during this golden age of capitalism is between the United States and the Soviet Union. Way 2 different ways of doing things, right? If we say go left, they're going to go right. They say our favorite color is red, we're going to say our favorite color is anything but red. So there's not a lot of uniformity there. Now, military bases and building grounds are going to be throughout the United States and the world. The United States is going to redistribute a lot of these bases. You ever wonder why there's military bases where they are today? There was some strategic value by placing them where they're at. 1950 was the last decade of major industry growth. Today, you think about, do a lot of people rush to go work in an industry job? A blue-collar job? No. There's some people that do. My dad did after he got out of farming. He worked as a meter guy building meters up in Nebraska City. But most people aren't going to say, I'm going to graduate high school and go work in a factory. And we don't have a lot of factory jobs in the area, but even Kansas City, Omaha, those are Kawasaki and Maryville. People don't go to, I'm going to go do that job when I graduate. It's, after I graduate, I can't find a job I really want to do, so I do those jobs. Because in this period, there were people, I want to go work for Ford. I want to go work for GMC. I want to go work for Boeing. I want to go work for McDonnell Douglas building stuff. Today, that's not part of our culture. Shifted to services, education, information, finance, and entertainment. You're going to see a rapid growth in a new industry field called tertiary jobs. Tertiary, don't ask me how to spell it, but I know I'm saying it right. That's one of the words I can say well. Tertiary jobs are service jobs. So if you work at a gas station, Brock, Zach, you work at Dusty Trails, Dalton, you become a trash man. Those are service jobs, right? Whether it be food, whether it be garbage, waste management stuff, those are jobs that provide services. That's the bulk of American society today, is service jobs, by the way. These tertiary jobs. They're not the most desirable at times, but they often do pay well. Trash men actually make a decent amount of money. People don't often realize that. But no one goes to school and say, I want to be a trash man someday. Okay. This is also where you're going to see the rapid growth of colleges as well. People are going to become more educated in this period, and this is where you're going to have the transformation of a lot of people go to college. Also, this is the acceleration and the transformation of Southern life. Golden Age 2, suburbdation. Main engines of economic growth during the 1950s were residential construction and spending on consumer goods. Shift from cities to suburbs created a large demand for housing, television sets, home appliances, and cars. You're going to have William and Alfred Levitt. They're going to create what's called Levittown, cookie cutter town. So people move out of the inner city and they move to what we call the suburbs. You've heard the burbs. Everyone, I think, knows what that context is. Are these large housing areas outside of the city, right? You go to Omaha, you go to even St. Joe, Kansas City, where there's large rows of houses that almost look the same. Those are burbs. That being said, the first one is called Levittown, and it's literally a cookie cutter house. It's like a square house, pre-manufactured, right there on this. I mean, it's really simple, but it's efficient. It's cheap. A lot of GI Bill members or former GIs come back to the war, start the families. They're going to buy these homes because they're cheap, affordable, and they can get financed through the GI Bill for them. They're also terrible today. You go to suburbs where there are all these houses that are decrepit, boring. The Levittown homes have crumbled. But that being said, it transformed how we did our housing. That being said, the automobile really hits its peak in the 50s and 60s. We create some of the best cars we've ever created in this period. Motels, drive-in movie theaters, and roadside eating establishments. The rise of McDonald's. Ray Kroc. By the way, you want to see something utterly terrifying? I saw it pop up on Facebook this weekend. Find the original Ronald McDonald outfit. It's like it or like Bobo the Clown, the serial killer. It is creepy and it's horribly bad. But anyway, cars symbolize the identification of freedom of individual mobility and private choice. Open road, Route 66 becomes very, very popular. Route 66 is what goes across the country. This is before the interstate. So these private highways, at least not private, but these small highways, state highways, used to go through a lot of towns, including Rockport. 275 was not Route 66, but 275 was there used to be a gas station up on 275 about 8 miles north of town. There's the remnants that are still there. The sign is just still kind of there, but there's no sign in it anymore. It's just like a big stand. But all that stuff went away with the creation of the interstates, one we'll talk about later. Actually, the movie Cars goes into great detail. Radiator Springs. They talked about how time forgotten them because the interstate came, right? People used to drive Route 66 through Radiator Springs. It was a great time, but then the interstate came and no one stopped until Lightning McQueen got lost. The growth of the West, modern West emerged in the post-war years. Federal spending helped fuel the flow of people in the West, also with new technology with air conditioning. Rapid expansion of oil production. California became the most populous state because people wanted to go where it's warm. Centerless Western cities such as Houston, Phoenix, and Los Angeles did not have a downtown that we used to think. They are more what we call a circle city, so like stuff radiates out. It's not one location. Like old cities of like downtown New York, Chicago, even Kansas City, St. Louis, the old cities of the East, the downtowns, Detroit, are going to start to die in the 50s and 60s because no one goes downtown. They go to the suburbs, the outer parts. Newer cities such as Los Angeles, San Francisco, Vegas, Houston, Phoenix, all these new cities in the West, they're not going to be concerned about an awesome downtown. They're going to be concerned about good infrastructure for the whole surrounding areas. The TV world, next slide. Okay, before I get to the TV world, you've got Levittown. There was actually 4 models once they got it done, but you can see mass production, right? It's taking Henry Ford's mass production concept of the car and making homes. Honestly, this one is blah, semi-blah, really blah, and semi-blah. These two aren't terrible, but these two are what I think of really bad design. But the 50s are good design because they can be made cheap, they can be made fairly efficient, and they hold up for that period. Now today, they're obviously dated. What it removes is the custom. What it really kills is what we call the craftsman home. My house in Maryville is a craftsman home built in the 20s. Not another house exactly like it in Maryville. Very unique design. There's elements that are similar, but it's unique on its own. This takes away that skill. Some say that's good, some say that's bad. I think it's a double-edged sword. The Golden Age. Images of middle class and advertisements for consumer goods blanketed the country. The TV is going to replace the newspaper as the leading leisure activity. Newspapers will still be very important, but now TV has become very, very prominent. I don't think I really need to tell you the importance of the TV. Now, the networks that were important in the 50s was CBS, ABC, NBC. CBS, NBC, ABC. Those were the 3. Other stuff did not come till later. So if people wanted the news, they went to the 3 major networks. CNN doesn't come around until 81. Fox doesn't come around until the late 80s or early 90s. Cable doesn't come about till the late 70s, early 80s. Whole different world that we have today in television. But then it was 3 networks. Women at work at home. Women, you're going to stay at home. But they're going to work as well in the 50s and 60s, but they're not going to be high-end jobs. Most rural women are going to work as waitresses, secretaries, not high-end VP or leadership roles. They would, if they worked, it'd be part-time to help. Basically, the father was supposed to be the breadwinner. Wasn't help to pull the, let's see here, not to help pull it out of poverty or to pursue an independent career, but basically support the middle class family living. So you want to take a vacation, the mom works a little bit, she saves all her salary, they take a nice vacation. The father makes sure everything's covered. Or if we want to do something extra fun, whatever it may be, the mom's going to pay for that with the extra money they earn. They also married younger. We're not going to marry in their mid to late 20s. They're going to marry like 19, 20, get married, have kids. They also have the rise of the baby boom. Not to surprise, it's a segregated landscape. Movement to the suburbs fueled the dream for many, but also promoted Americanization. A lot of these Italians, Scots, people, English that had moved to the United States a couple generation or a generation before are now going to be totally Americanized. So you could have a person who is a second generation Italian, you would never, like Zamperini, when we watch the movie Unbroken, or you've heard of the movie Unbroken, those lines will blur now. However, the one that will remain is the black and white line. As late as the 1990s, nearly 90% of the my gosh, why am I really struggling right now? Suburban, there we go. Suburban whites lived in communities with non-white populations or less than 1%. So meaning, African Americans are still segregated in the 90s by living. That doesn't mean they can't move, but because going back to when these families came in the 40s and 50s, even these Levitt towns, did they limit where African Americans could live? Absolutely 100%. They did it in subtle ways, and also African Americans didn't necessarily want to move into an all-white neighborhood. So they tended to group themselves together. So what you're going to have is a default segregation. Even after segregation is ended, you're still going to have a group of people that are going to challenge it. Let's see where I was at. Federal policy, federal courts reinforce this. Urban renewal, whites most often out of the city center to allow new projects. Blacks move to rundown city neighborhoods where they could afford, and thus you're going to have the birth of the inner city as we know it. Divided society, suburbanization hardened the racial lines of division. Movement of whites and blacks across the city or country. 3 million blacks left the South, so you're going to have another mass exodus out of the South. Non-whites remain concentrated in manual and unskilled jobs. So meaning African Americans were the factory workers. They did a lot of the service jobs that were not desirable, jobs that people didn't want. And this is what the Hispanics have replaced today in our society. A lot of the jobs nobody wants to do, a lot of Hispanics are doing them, if you have not noticed it. Old city centers where poor blacks and Latinos remained were seen as places of crime, poverty, and welfare. The Golden Age, number 5, religion and anti-communism. During the 1950s, the majority of Americans, highest in nation's history, were affiliated with church or synagogue. I think it was like 80 or 90% were affiliated with some sort of religion. 1954, Congress added the words "under God" to the Pledge of Allegiance to fight communism. The Pledge of Allegiance was actually instituted by a pro-communist individual, but by adding "under God," it completely undermined their whole objective with it, trying to indoctrinate this form of communism. 1957, "In God We Trust" was added to paper money. Big Hollywood productions, The Ten Commandments and Ben-Hur, were created in the 1950s. Both, I believe, won Best Picture. Both featured a very famous actor for the period, Charlton Heston, who was actually a very good actor. You might know him from the Planet of the Apes. If you've ever seen the original Planet of the Apes, that is Charlton Heston. He was a big-time Hollywood actor. And at one point, he was the president of the NRA towards the end of his life, too, which was kind of funny. But then you have the rise of Billy Graham. And his revival preaching as a Southern Baptist preacher would go around the country. And going back to Louis Zamperini directly affected his life and helped him get over his PTSD from World War II. But those become very, very strong American ideological beliefs in the 50s, right? Religion is very commonplace. It's spoken about. It's not shunned. It's not hidden. Very, very strict rules, which hurts American society to some degree because that causes what we really the 60s with the rebellious age and the hippie movement. Because American families become so regimented, so strict on things or things you can't do or that's the devil work. Teens will rebel in the 60s. 1954-55, when Elvis comes out, people freak out because his hips were moving in ways that hips shouldn't move. Now, we'll get to more of that later. The Libertarian Conservatives and the New Conservatives. Libertarian Conservatives were freedom meant individual autonomy, limited government, and unregulated capitalism. Thus, what a libertarian is today, right? A libertarian is a whole distinct political group you can be part of that believes low taxes, very little government interference, but on other elements, very conservative, right? They're basically Republican/conservative with very small government, limited spending, don't interfere with a lot of things. New Conservatives were tolerant of differences, a central belief of modern liberalism. They offer no substance for the search for absolute truth, needed an arm to self-morality and intellectually. This laid the foundation for the 21st century differences that we face today. A common foe kept them united, though, during this period, which is the Soviet Union and the federal government size. So technically, the Republican Party or the Conservative Party of this period, there was two parts to it, but they were unified over their fear of the Soviet Union and the federal government size, and you really don't see them split till the 90s. And that it's not necessarily it's not even the Tea Party movement. It's more of like, I'm super conservative, I'm super moderate. And a lot of those moderates became Democrats to some degree, where they're not part of either party. Honestly, we could really use this. The real for a third party is really, really evident. So, Okay, we're going to stop there today. Oh, wait, we got to get Moses in there. This is the this is the Charlton Heston from the movie The Ten Commandments. And this were actually really it's a color movie. Not all movies in the 50s were color. This is a big time production. They made all the sets. It's a pretty awesome movie. The funny thing about it is Charlton Heston was a great speaker, the bravado American actor of the 50s. But the reality is the historical Moses was not illiterate, but he could not speak very well and stuttered when he was in public. So that's the funny thing, is if you actually study the actual historical biblical Moses, it's the opposite of Charlton Heston.
Just let it be a good movie.
But it is a good movie, though. I actually think Ben-Hur is better.
I haven't seen Ben-Hur.
So the Ten Commandments story is about the Exodus, Moses leading the Israelites out of Egypt, and Ben-Hur is about a Jew in Israel whose life is overshadowed, so there's two stories going on. His story about his rise and his fall, and then also the sub-story in Ben-Hur is the life and death of Jesus. So he interacts with Jesus throughout the whole story. It's a really good movie, though. Okay, we'll get to the Eisenhower era tomorrow. I like Ike. This concludes today's lesson. Have a great day.